A hellhole on the brink of collapse. That's how the United Nations has described the situation in Gaza as thousands of civilians flee their homes following an ultimatum from Israel. The Israeli Defence Force warned they had 24 hours to relocate if they wanted to live, a demand human rights groups have labelled a war crime.
A warning message arriving from the sky. The Israeli military dropping leaflets over northern Gaza, telling civilians to flee south within 24 hours if they want to live. 1.1 million people told to get out with only one main road to evacuate. They pack their belongings but don't know where or how to leave.
The problem is there is no enough cars.
Many have also run out of petrol, fuel cut off under Israel's blockade.
OK, secure the road towards Salahuddin and we will go. But you can't take 10 or 15 members of your family on an unsafe route.
Desperate families deciding to walk, young children carrying bags. Nearly half of the Strip's population is under 18.
It happened to our grandfathers, said Mohammed Rocker. Now it's happening to us. It raises the ghosts of the past.
Close to 1 million Palestinians were forced to flee their homes during the 1948 war that led to the foundation of Israel. Aid groups appalled by the order.
Under humanitarian law, it's called forcible transfer of populations, and it's a war crime.
Hamas told residents to ignore it and stay put.
Hamas continues to use innocent civilians as human shields and is reportedly blocking roads to prevent Palestinians from moving to southern Gaza.
Leaving isn't an option for everyone.
It is impossible to evacuate vulnerable hospital patients from the north of Gaza.
Doctors Without Borders revealing one hospital has been given just 2 hours to evacuate. North or south, disaster is everywhere. Paramedics are overwhelmed.
We're descending to a depth of darkness I simply haven't seen.
The UN has urged Israel to withdraw the 24-hour ultimatum.
We never set a time frame. We understand it will take time. I know that from tomorrow the world is going to call us war criminals again.
As the deadline loomed, the Israeli military revealed localised raids had been carried out in Gaza over the past day, with the aim to locate rocket crews and hostages. Hamas releasing these chilling videos shortly after, claiming to show militants taking care of Israeli child hostages.
Bismillah. Yalla, drink.
A taunt. The Israeli Prime Minister giving a rare Shabbat address to the nation.
I emphasise, it's just the beginning. Our enemies have just begun to pay the price.
All retaliation for the biggest attack in Israel's history. Defence still grappling with how it happened.
We're at a conference centre in Tel Aviv, which from the outside appears pretty normal, but what's happening in here is truly remarkable. We've got hundreds of the top minds across the technology and science sectors who've come together voluntarily and are working together to try and locate and confirm the status of the missing people in this war, including the hostages in Gaza.
Oh, we had hundreds of matches.
But success in this room often means heartbreaking confirmation of the worst.
We try to understand, to figure out who right now in Gaza, dead or alive.
Among the minds at work is Sydney man David Kavanagh, who is using AI to scan and log identifications.
According to one piece of information, an ID number, a part of a picture, a part of a movie, we're able to identify that person.
Many Australians escaping while they can. The first government repatriation flight taking a plane load of people to the UK. Rosa Tunananu, desperate to see her husband and son back in Sydney.
I want to go to see my family. Australia's my home. We want to go home.
It is a relief, but it's also tinged with other emotions. We feel guilty for leaving.
The flight packed with families, taking their seats for the final stretch to safety, taking off from Tel Aviv to a round of applause. Landing in London, no sirens or shelters.
I'm feeling extremely sad. My heart's in Israel.
But relieved to be safe.
So we're very, very grateful. So happy. Yes, so grateful.
In Tel Aviv, Israel, Edward Godfrey, 9 News.
9 correspondent Alison Petrowski is in southern Israel near the Gaza border. Ali, evening to you. There's been an update on the deadline tonight.
Yeah, good evening to you, Mia. There had been so much confusion about this deadline. In theory, it should have passed hours ago. Now some clarification from the IDF a short time ago, the Israeli Defense Force, who say that residents in Gaza's north now have 6 more hours to get themselves to South Gaza. Now, it's not clear, Mia, how flexible that deadline is, whether or not it could go over 6 hours. Maybe they'll give them 7 or 8. Maybe they'll even give them till tomorrow. It is still such a fluid situation here, Mia. As you might be able to see behind me, we have a field full of Israeli Defense Force tanks. They are waiting for their next orders, and those next orders very well could be an all-out ground assault. As for civilians in Gaza, it remains such a confusing situation. The Israeli government telling them they need to evacuate and they need to get out. Hamas telling them that they need to stay in the north. And look, Mia, even if they can get to the south, it is such a dire situation there. There is nowhere for them to stay. It is simply overwhelming. The shelters there are completely overwhelmed. Today, Penny Wong is urging the 20 Australians that remain in Gaza to try and get out as the drumbeat to this invasion grows louder. Mia?
Ali, thank you and stay safe. To some breaking news now, and Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong has just announced that Australia will send an initial $10 million in humanitarian aid for civilians affected by the war in Gaza. Of that, $3 million will go to the Red Cross for medical assistance, while $7 million will go towards providing critical support, including water and food. Thousands of Palestinian supporters have vowed to return for a second rally in Brisbane's CBD next week after marching through the streets overnight. The demonstration, unauthorised but peaceful, with attendees calling for an end to the deadly conflict.
Flanked by police, a passionate assembly with a pro-Palestinian agenda echoing through the inner city. The turnout, more than 2,000, their message loud and clear.
For God's sake, those people sitting there, no water, no food.
We don't think it's right what's happening, and we just want to show our support.
Crowds swelled in King George Square earlier in the evening, taking in emotional addresses from organisers.
We call to an end of the siege on Gaza, which as we speak is intensifying and killing children.
And Greens Lord Mayoral candidate Jonathan Sriranganathan taking aim at media coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Too many news reports where the journalist ends it with a dry comment of, oh, it's terribly sad and it's terribly complex, isn't it? It is not complex!
A heavy police presence surrounding the masses, officers on standby to intervene if tensions flared. There were fears violence could erupt following these fiery scenes in Sydney earlier this week.
There have been announcements in our community that we want to have like a certain standard of behaviour.
While emotions ran high, Brisbane's rally was peaceful. There were no arrests, and authorities will be hoping these gatherings remain respectful. Organisers have announced that they intend to rally in Brisbane CBD again on October 21. Alarm, grief and heartache hitting home, a world away from the war zone. Abby Guerin, 9 News.
Violence has erupted in another Palestinian territory, hundreds taking to the streets of the West Bank to demonstrate their anger over Israel's attacks. It comes as enormous crowds turned out right around the world, answering televised calls for a day of jihad from a former Hamas leader.
In the shadows of war, this is a day of prayer. On the streets of the West Bank, fire and violence. In East Jerusalem, the mosque considered by Muslims the third holiest place in the world, younger Muslims were banned, deemed a security risk. Only older ones allowed to pray under the watch of Israeli police. Arab anger over Israel's attacks on Gaza growing.
It is ethnic cleansing.
A televised call for jihad from the ex-Hamas leader was heard loud and clear. In Baghdad, tens of thousands rallied. The Star of David set alight. In Iran, death to Israel, they chant. Protests too in Yemen and Egypt, and across Israel's border in Jordan. Protesters trying to break into the West Bank were pushed back with tear gas. And in Lebanon, militant group Hezbollah says it's ready to join attacks against Israel. Conflict from a region on the brink is spreading around the world. France is on its highest state of alert after a teacher was murdered. In China, an Israeli embassy worker stabbed, while in New York, schools and synagogues were closed as pro-Palestinian supporters marched.
With worries about anti-Semitic attacks on their minds, US officials have bolstered security at major cities across the country as President Biden's top diplomat dashes around the Middle East with a staunch defence of Israel.
We continue to discuss with Israel the importance of taking every possible precaution to avoid harming civilians.
The president's fury at Hamas still visible.
These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure.
As the militant group welcomes an offer from Russia's Vladimir Putin, who is at war himself, to mediate a ceasefire. In Washington, D.C., Jonathan Kersley, 9 News.